Omar Ballo is a physical monster who is a mismatch nightmare.
Said it, I'm golden. Told you I'm shining. Had to break through. Plan perfect timing. Giving no hands. Go get it. Radix the ruler. Can't put them past.
So in my last couple of videos, I did a breakdown of some of the Heat's undrafted free agent signings. We talked about Vlad Golden and Steve Settle III. Both of those videos are performing really well, so I do greatly appreciate your support. Make sure to like this video and subscribe because I'm on the grind to hit 8,000 subs. I do appreciate you. But both of those guys were pretty much signed immediately by the Miami Heat after the second round of the draft concluded. But another guy that the Heat signed pretty quickly was Oumar Ballo. So I decided to do some research, and I'm not going to lie, I'm pretty intrigued by the big man. That's not to say that he's going to be some main contributor for the Miami Heat this season. He was only signed to a summer league deal, unlike Vlad Golden, who got a two-way contract, and Steve Settle, who got an Exhibit 10. But you never know. I mean, in past summer leagues, a lot of guys stood out who you weren't necessarily looking for. We can go back to 2019. We were all excited to watch Tyler Hero, but Duncan Robinson and a guy named Kendrick Nunn really stood out. I mean, Kendrick Nunn ended up being second in Rookie of the Year that season, and he was a guy we never even heard of going into that summer league. You can go to 2022. Heat fans were looking out for Nikola Jovic and Omar but a guy named Orlando Robinson really stood out. And of course, stuck with Miami for a few seasons. I think he signed a deal with Toronto and or Sacramento last season. So he's sticking around a little bit. And then we can even go to last season in the Summer League where there was a number of guys that we were excited for. Keshad Johnson, Pelle Larsson, Khalil Ware. But there was this little kid named Isaiah Stevens who really stood out. And of course, he ended up signing a two-way contract with the Miami Heat. And as it stands now, it remains to be seen if he'll be back with the team. But he basically came out of nowhere and stood out. So you never really know who the Heat might sign after Summer League. And maybe Oumar Ballo is their next great. One of the reasons that he interests me is because he's only 22 years old, which is 2 years younger than Vlad and Settle. But he's also way bigger. Oumar Ballo was listed at 7 feet tall, 260 pounds. That kind of size excites me. Pause on pause. But as far as weight, he's 20 pounds more than Vlad Golden and 60 to 80 pounds more than Steve Settle. Obviously, they're a different type of players, but still, that just goes to say that the Heat do not have a guy who, and really haven't had a guy who's as physically dominant as Oumar Ballo since who? Eddie Curry? And that guy was just overweight. He sucked. Point is, he is physically dominant, and the Heat haven't had someone like that in quite some time. Now, Ballo was born in Mali. He actually used to be a goalie, which is insane to think about. Somebody at his size who grew up playing goalie. I mean, I'm assuming he was always big. That's just insane to think about. But once I started looking more into Ballo, it really didn't surprise me because he's way more agile than you might expect, which obviously for goalie is very important. I wish Miami had a guy who was more agile because I just watched them play PSG and they got their ass kicked. But what can I expect? I'm recording this video right after that game ended, so it only finished 4-0, so I guess it's not too bad. But anyways, Omar went to high school in Spain, although he was born in Mali, but he ended up playing in basketball camps all over the place. I think I saw in Mexico, I saw some other spots. So he is a guy who was really trying to hone in on his basketball craft as a teenager. Eventually, he went on to be recruited by Gonzaga, which is obviously a very big basketball program. Ended up playing all of his college career at some pretty reputable basketball schools because after his 1 year at Gonzaga, where he didn't play too much, only played about 6 minutes a night, he did play the next 3 seasons at Arizona, in which he got increased playing time every year. And in those seasons, he actually played with Pelle Larsson and Keshad Johnson. So clearly he's a guy that I'm sure the Heat have been scouting for quite some time, being that they also had their eyes on Pelle and Keshad. But after 3 seasons at Arizona, he did play his final year of college ball at Indiana, where, funny enough, he was actually Khalil Ware's replacement. Of course, Khalil Ware got drafted, and I guess Indiana was looking for a center. Oumar Ballo is the guy that they went with. Now, if you look at his numbers in his senior season, you could pretty much tell immediately what type of player he is. In his final year, he averaged 13 points per game, 9 boards, almost 62% from the field. And throughout his entire college career, he's basically been a super efficient always above 60% from the field, a dominant rebounder who can block shots. That's what he is as a player. But from watching the film, I can tell you he's a little bit more of an intriguing prospect than that. I think that's why the Heat were so eager to sign him, because he's not just some big stiff. Like, he is more fluid than you would expect. He's more versatile defensively than just some paint presence. I've seen many clips where he's using his length in the passing lanes, stripping defenders on ball. He also had some very impressive passes that showed me he's got some unique vision to him also for his size. And I think there's a role in the NBA for this type of player, right? When you think about a non-spacing big, there's a reason we didn't read his three-point numbers when we looked at the stats. It's because he shot 0% on 0 attempts. He's not a shooter. He's a very poor free throw shooter. He's not a floor spacer. But for someone who's a little bit more versatile than just some big stiff, I do think there's a role for that guy in today's NBA. On the lower end, think maybe a guy like Kevon Looney, who had a very defined role on some championship teams. Obviously doesn't play as much now, but every now and again, when you need a guy who could just be an energy big, get some rebounds, if you need some size, Kevon Looney's a guy that is still good at that. Maybe in the middle tier, Omar could be a guy like Daniel Gafford, a non-floor spacer, but still a very, very critical big for the Dallas Mavericks. He just signed an extension with them, so obviously they value him. And then maybe on the higher end, look at a guy like Jalen Duren, a guy who is in his second or third year in the league. Very important piece for the Detroit Pistons, and he's a non-floor spacer. So for all that talk about, you need to be able to shoot to be effective in today's NBA, that is a bit overstated, because there is plenty of guys who could still provide a role. But now I want to discuss Oumar Ballow's strengths and weaknesses and how I think they would affect the Miami Heat. I would say that his strengths include, one, his physical size. The NBA is moving in a direction of big man ball again. We keep talking about these double big man lineups, and I think it's important because look at the NBA champions, Chet Holmgren and Isaiah Hartenstein. Those guys started a lot, got a lot of run together. And the NBA is transitioning away from the whole small ball thing. Even look at the Houston Rockets. We talk about Steven Adams and Şengün. You got the New York Knicks with Mitchell Robinson and Karl Anthony Towns. The Minnesota Timberwolves, they just paid Julius Randle about 5 minutes ago. He got a bag, which does kind of surprise me, but they've played a lot of Randle and Gobert. Those are two big physically dominant centers. So the NBA is moving back into that direction, and I think it's important for the Heat to get somebody who is physically dominant. As we stated earlier, they haven't had that in some time. Look at the size on the Miami Heat right now. Look at our big man rotation. Obviously, you just got Vlad Golden. I think that's kind of what they're hoping he can become. But Oumar Ballo is bigger. The guys currently on the roster, not counting Vlad, you got Khalil Ware, who I love, but he's more of a vertical spacer, still a little skinny, more wiry. We know that. Same with Nikola Jovic. We don't look at him as a physically dominant big man, although he has added on a ton of weight. And I do think he can abuse a mismatch if a smaller guy switches on him. We've seen that a little bit. But then look at Kevin Love, 6'8". The guy used to be big, but he lost a ton of weight because he's a GQ model now. So we don't have anybody that's physically dominant. And I think that's something that Oumar Ballo is. I don't think he is. It would just be nice to have someone out there that could just punish defenders and throw them out there for some small sports just to muck things up and just be big for the sake of being big. Enough of getting guys who are play bigger than they are. I hate that. You see these Hayward Highsmith minutes at the 4. We saw Kashad Johnson at center last year because they play bigger than they are. We saw that with Caleb Martin. We saw that with PJ Tucker. Yes, they play bigger than they are. Why not get a guy who's actually big? And that's something that Oumar Ballo can do. The next strength I would just say is straight up efficiency. Yes, okay, he's not a floor spacer, but the shots he does take, he does make them always well over 60%. And as someone who would be a role player on this team, you don't want someone who's going to miss shots, have empty possessions. You want someone who's a play finisher, and Oumar Ballo does that exceptionally well. Of course, the next strength I would say is shot blocking. Definitely showed good speed and recovery to me to be able to rotate a little bit and block shots inside. Outside of Khalil Ware, and now maybe Vlad Golden, they don't really have an interior presence inside. Bam Adebayo's not bad at it. Has one of the best blocks in NBA history on Jason Tatum in the bubble. But that's not his game. He's more of a perimeter defender. A lot of times he's not even in the paint to block shots because he has to be on the perimeter. And if you have a guy like Oumar Ballo, he would just help clean up a lot of things inside, especially if your guard rotation consists of Tyler Hero, who we know is not great defensively. Duncan Robinson, a decision is going to be made on him in 3 hours, whether he's still here or not next season. Davion Mitchell, they just re-signed, so you do have him defensively. Kasparis, we're still waiting to be seen how good a defender he is. So you got some questions in your backcourt defensively. And if guys do get blown past, it'd be nice to have a guy like Omar Ballo backing up Khalil Ware. So you always have someone in the paint that can deter shots if the opposing team was to get inside the paint. The next strength I would say is his rebounding / hustle. He's a guy who tries very hard. Of course, he's a good rebounder because he's huge, but also he's just a Heat culture type guy. We've been saying that in almost every single video. The Heat need to get back to that. That's why I'm thrilled they signed Davion Mitchell. That's why I'm thrilled they drafted a guy like Kasparis Yakachonis, who's out there diving on the floor for loose balls right after returning from a forearm injury. That's why I'm glad they got a guy like Vlad Golden, who's out there busting his ass to dunk on everybody. You need some more Heat culture guys, and that's something that Omar Ballo is, no doubt about it. The last strength I have listed is his sneaky vision / mobility on both sides of the ball. The reason I put this as sneaky is because I'm watching highlights on him. I'm not watching full film. So I don't know if these are just some specific plays that he did that make him look a lot better in these areas than he is. I'm not saying he's some elite facilitator because he still averaged 2 turnovers a game his final season in college to a little over 2 assists. So that's not great. But he's shown the ability to make some nice reads. Like, you can't put together a Hassan Whiteside passing highlight mix because there was none. And the fact that you at least got some clips from Omar Ballo show me that the potential is at least there to be decent at that, which helps add some versatility to him. Same thing with the mobility on defense and on offense. Like I said, he's not just in a shot blocker. I think he can get to the perimeter a little bit. You don't want him guarding 4s out there and stuff on the perimeter, but he's not super slow. He looks way more less clunky, less clumsy too, I guess, than Rudy Gobert. So I just don't want you to think that's what he is because of his size. That's not the case. As far as his weaknesses, they're pretty clear. Spacing, you already got some bigs that, Bam Adebayo stretching the floor a little bit, same with Khalil Ware. But they're not shooters. You want someone who could space. Jonathan Kuminga's not a floor spacer. I'm already mentally preparing for the Heat to sign him because it seems like it's trending that direction. But it's never good when you have someone who can't shoot. But like we've been saying, there's a role for that. So he's not a great spacer. Free throw shooting was also poor. Got to the line a ton, but was either a little over 50% or even under 50% one season from the free throw line. Very bad. I don't like that type of player, but you're not looking at Ballo as a guy who's going to play a ton of minutes a night. He's not going to be in there in crunch time so they could hack him. They're not going to hack a Shaq. Like, if that's his flaw, it is what it is. He's an undrafted player. The last weakness I have listed is just his overall size over the course of a season. Because, yes, he's physically dominant, but he's not the most in shape prospect, and you just kind of have to wonder how that'll be over the course of an 82-game year. I do see here Duncan Robinson in the Heat, Miami guard declines, $20 million early termination option. Oh, interesting. Sounds like the Heat may actually work with him to extend him. We'll read some about this later. Maybe we'll get it says Duncan Robinson D becoming unrestricted free agent, though a new 3-team deal to keep in Miami is not out, or 3-year deal to keep in Miami is not out the question. Interesting. We'll see what happens with Duncan Robinson. I'm thinking that'll maybe be tomorrow's video because I want to give it kind of a day to get some more details on that. But yeah, obviously Ballow's big. He's not the most in shape type of guy, but give a guy like that some Heat culture, maybe he gets ripped, he gets jacked, and next thing you know, he's a much better player because he's in peak physical condition. If there's any team that could do that, it would be the Miami Heat. Now, he's not Zion in terms of his shape, but for the same reason, it's kind of why I was interested in seeing Zion on Miami. Get someone who has had weight concerns in this Heat system and just see what the Heat can do with it. But overall, the Heat need this type of player. I think he'd be a good fit here. They need someone who's big for the sake of being big. I could easily see him playing that Thomas Bryant / Dwayne Dedmon energy off the bench role. I think every team really needs that. Maybe there's a night where you're playing an extra big team. You're playing Jokic, you're playing Embiid. Put Ballo in there a little bit just to muck it up. Make things easy on those guys so they can't just back us down like we've seen them back down, Bam Adebayo or whoever else. Not that Bam can guard those guys. He actually guards them pretty well, but just in general, we've seen them body Khalil Ware. We've seen Zubac body Khalil Ware. You know what I mean? Maybe if there's a game like that, you always have Ballo to kind of throw in there to muck things up a little bit. And not even against the stars like those guys. Maybe you're playing a Clint Capella, wherever he's at now. I don't know. Maybe you're playing Jalen Duren. Maybe you're playing Nikola Vucevic. who's more of a perimeter guy now anyways. But guys who we've seen dominate the Heat in the past inside, keep getting offensive rebounds, just having a guy like Ballo to kind of shut that down, I think is critical. So we'll see how Summer League goes. I do hope that he gets a good amount of minutes. I don't really want to see a lot of these older guys play too much, like Kira Lewis. He's been in the league for 6 years. Khalil Ware, he'll play like 2 games probably. But Pelle Larsson, we kind of know what he is at this point. Give some of these unknowns some run, and then that way we'll see what the Miami Heat have. Because so right now, only one of the 3 two-way spots is filled up. That's with Vlad Golden. I do think Drew Smith might get the second. So either way, you'd still have one spot open. And I kind of would like to maybe see it go to a guy like Omar Ballo or Steve Settle. So Summer League's in a couple of weeks. We'll see what happens. Make sure y'all like this video and subscribe because your support is greatly appreciated. And I'll see y'all in the next video. Peace out, everyone.
Look, pull up in your city trying to get that dead face. Do it on my own, I don't need no dead weight. Had to kill him off, yeah, I need a head space. You know this homegrown bitch don't offend me.